Played over 200 games for Millwall. Big, big part of the club's history, a big part of your life and your career. Was it a tough decision for you to leave the club when Sheffield United put in a big offer for you to come and join their ranks?
Yeah, I didn't want to leave. So the season finished, and Jeff Burnage, who was, I think he was at the time chief executive, he pulled me in the office and said, "Look, the club have had a bid from Sheffield United. We're selling you." And I said, "What do you mean we're selling? I don't want to leave." And he said to me, "Look, the club need the money. You've got to go." And I was in the office in tears. I said, "Look, I do not want to leave this football. I love it here." In my mind, coming through the youth system, I just felt like I'd be there forever. That was my club. I wasn't going to go anywhere. I didn't need to. I sort of thought we'll get to the Premier League at some point with this squad. And for him to be telling me that it was the end and that he was going to be selling the so-called better players, that was that. So I kind of was forced out, really. And I remember at the time being a little bit pissed off because I remember the fans were giving me pelters that I'd asked for a transfer, which was absolutely not true. I didn't want to go at all. And at the time, I didn't personally think that Sheffield United's squad was any better than Millwall's squad. When I got there, I realised how good their squad was, and it was as good, maybe better. And quickly realised that we had a really good opportunity to go to the Premier League, which we duly did. But yeah, certainly I didn't want to go. Like you said, I've been there seven years and had some great times, met some great people. So it was a wrench to leave, but looking back on it now, it was the right decision because of the way the club was set up. By the time I left, it just fell apart, and unfortunately, that season Millwall got relegated, and obviously took a little bit of time to get themselves back up to where they belonged.
One of the game's most interesting characters in Neil Warnock signed you for just under £1 million for Sheffield United. Big signing for the club. What was your first meeting, and how did that go with Neil Warnock? Your first impressions, first meetings with him?
Yeah, so I went up. So the club had agreed a fee. We hadn't agreed like personal terms or anything like that. So I went up with my now wife, who's my girlfriend, and I sat down with Neil Warnock and his wife, and we went out for lunch, and we just chatted football. And he told me exactly what I wanted to hear. I was the last piece of the puzzle. If I signed, we were going to make the Premier League. Blah 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 blah. And again, he showed me the love. He made me feel wanted. And I remember coming away from the meeting with him, and I said to my wife, I said, like, he's a little bit crazy, but I kind of like him. I think I'm going to like playing for him. If he sticks to what he says, because he said, you are so important to us. And I felt that. I felt it through pre-season. He talked me up in all the papers. He told all the players what I was going to do. So there's a little bit of pressure, but I thought this is nice to have a guy that really, really believes in me. And I went out and I played well that season. And, it wasn't just down to me, certainly, but I think there was myself, Steve Cabba, Neil Shipley and Danny Webber. I think we all got 9 or 10 goals each that year. So we really shared it around, and we were a team and a pretty decent team. And it was only Reading, who were fantastic that year, who could top us. So we finished second and got promoted to the Premier League.
Yeah, good. Funny you mentioned Steve Cabba. He used to live in my road as a child. Okay. Really nice man. Always come out and kick the ball with us, even when he was going up the leagues in tears. Great.
Yeah. Top man, Cabs. Really nice.
Neil Shipley as well, great player.
Yeah. No, we had good people there, good people, good players. One thing I will say about Warnock, he was very astute that year in the transfer market, and he went and got guys that were hungry. He went and got guys that had been there and done it. He got Craig Short in. I think Craig Short was 37 at the time. He got Lillian Nallis in. He got Neil Shipley in, all quite cheap. The wages would have been quite high, but he didn't have to pay too much money for him. Then he got myself and Danny Webber, Keith Gillespie, and we just put together a squad. They already had Phil Jagielka, Michael Tong, Nick Montgomery, Chris Morgan. So the building blocks were all there, and we were just sort of the finishing touches. And then we pretty much cruised through the season, and were a match for anybody that year.
The season that Reading went up was obviously they blitzed the league that year. You guys were really close behind them. What was Warnock like in that chase and in that whole battle and build up?
No, he was calm. He was calm all the way through. And again, he showed massive belief. He didn't shirk it. He was always in the paper saying that he believed we were good enough, and I think that just spread through the squad, and it certainly made me believe. At no point did I think we weren't going to do it. It was odd because I've had seasons where you're up and down, but we were always in the top two. that whole season. I mean, I think we started the season and we were a few points clear of Reading. We actually went to Reading and we absolutely battered them and somehow lost. Keith Gillespie got sent off. It was just a shit show, but we played really well. They then went on a little bit of a decent run and were a few points clear, and we never could quite reel them in. They ended up getting, I think, the highest points ever in the bloody championship. So they were a good side, but we were not bad ourselves. And it was only Leeds chasing us, but we felt we always had their measure. And we hung on and we finished a few points clear of them as well in the end.
Yeah, you guys, excuse me, just going to cut myself. What's it like to win promotion then, second? Is it a little bit anticlimactic, or is it satisfying that you are going up to the next division?
Oh, we didn't care about winning it or coming second, honestly. I didn't give a shit. You know, they can take the trophy. All we knew was we'd be in the same league as them the following season. And that was all we were worried about. It was, again, you've got a lot of guys that probably believe they were Premier League players but had never played there. You've got a lot of guys in the squad that had been in the Premier League years before, probably thought they were never going to get back there. You know, Craig Short's going back into the Premier League at 38. Neil Shipley potentially going into the Premier League at whatever he was, you know, mid-30s. So Keith Gillespie, another one going back into the Premier League. So it was pretty cool to see them getting one more go and seeing us younger fellas getting our first opportunity. So it was a nice mix.
What does it feel like to be a Premier League player? Was there a moment where you thought to yourself, I've actually accomplished a big goal here, something I've set out to achieve since I was a young footballer coming up?
Yeah, for me, it was the realisation of a dream. But I look back and again, it's something I go around talking to the kids about these days, that you've got to reset your goals. For me, I'd made it at that point. I'd played in the FA Cup final. Once I'd made my debut in the Premier League, I was a Premier League player. But really, I should have gone, right, what's next? What do I need? What do I want to do? Do I want to become a Premier League regular? Do I want to become a Premier League star? You know, what was next? There was never anything next for me. It was like, right, tick that off. I've done it. And then 4 or 5 months later, I was being transferred back out of the club to Crystal Palace in the Championship. And I never actually played in the Premier League again.
Now, before we come on to your departure, which is quite an interesting thing in itself, what happened between you and Neil Warnock, in your opinion, for you to fall out of favour? Was it something off the pitch? Was there an incident that we're maybe not aware of? Can you explain?
No. Yeah, so in the summer, I realised that, you know, I needed to be absolutely fighting fit if I wanted to play in the Premier League. So I went away. I worked very, very hard. I came back in. He realised I worked hard. He pulled me aside. He said, look, I want you to start for me first game of the season. I duly did. We played against Liverpool. Started that game. I think I came off with about 20 minutes to go. I played in the first 3 home games in the Premier League, but he wouldn't play me away. So by this point, I was going away to, you know, whether it was Tottenham or Fulham or whatever, and I was never even in the squad. So I'd be travelling down there and I'd be, you know, 17th man or 18th man. So there'd be 1 or 2 of us just sat in the stand. And I remember thinking, like, this is odd. You know, I've been in the team, all of a sudden I'm not. So I went and saw Stuart McCall, who was his assistant. And I said, I don't understand, like, what's going on? If he doesn't want to fucking play me, don't take me. I don't know how he relayed that back to Warnock, but I didn't make another squad for the next, like, 6 weeks. So I went to see Neil and I said, you know, what's going on? He said, look, I just don't think you are... He said, I don't think this is the right squad for you in the Premier League. He said, I need guys that are just going to work hard and battle and to try and stay in the Premier League. And he said, you're a bit of a luxury. At the time, I disagreed. Now I look back and he was probably right. But I said to him, look, if you're not going to play me, can I go and play for Barbados? We've got a Caribbean Cup that's going on at the moment. And if I'm just sitting here doing nothing, twiddling my thumbs, going to go and play for them. So that's when I went off to Barbados. And whilst I was there, I think the second time I was there, I had a phone call from the club saying they'd accepted a bid from Crystal Palace.
Now, there was quite a lot of clubs interested in you. Crystal Palace secured your signature for 800k. So Sheffield recouped the majority of the money they'd laid out on you. Who was the manager of Crystal Palace? Was it Alan Pardew at the time?
No, it was Peter Taylor. So it was Peter Taylor. So I had the choice to go to Palace and Leeds. So Palace and Leeds had agreed a fee with Sheffield. Leeds with Dennis Wise was the manager. So that was a big pull for me to go there because, you know, I really liked Wisey and my time at Millwall with him. But I wanted to be back down south. I missed my friends and family, to be fair. That was the biggest thing. And I decided I'd go down there. Met with Peter Taylor. I wasn't overly sure of him, if I'm honest, but I think the fact that it was down south sort of overshadowed everything else. I went and looked at the training ground and all that sort of stuff, and that was magnificent. And I thought, this is a team that can get back into the Premier League. But met Simon Jordan as well, and again wasn't really sure about him. And the day that I went to sign my contract, we'd agreed my contract, and I'm at the training ground to sign the contract. And my agent's reading through the long and short of it, and he said, "Oh, Paul, I just need to speak to you." So we step outside the office, and he said, "Look, they've changed the wording." And basically, I'd agreed a signing on fee each year, and they changed the wording from it being a signing on fee to being a loyalty bonus. So you only got it if you stayed till the end of your contract. So it was about 150 grand that they were going to do me out of potentially by this change of wording. And I remember saying to him, I'm not sure this is the right place for me. But obviously the deal was there. In the end, I signed it. But it was one of them. It's probably the only time in my career that I came out of signing a new contract, and I wasn't quite sure. I wasn't quite sure whether the chairman was what he said he was. I wasn't quite sure on the manager, and it just left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. And it never really came right. Nothing to do with the club or the fans. They gave me a lot of time because I was always injured there. But it just never really happened for me. And I look back and 60 odd games I think I played in 2.5 years. I played 55 games a season sometimes at Millwall, so it was pretty clear that it just wasn't happening for me in terms of my injuries and stuff.
Moving back down south from Sheffield, a big adjustment in itself. You know how much it rains in Sheffield. How much more was you settled? I know the injuries sort of really halted your time at Crystal Palace, but was you more settled as a person back down south and your home life and everything around you?
Yeah, I was. It was nice to be able to just go and see my mates that weren't footballers. It was nice being able to go and see my mum and see my sister and just be around people that I knew cared for me. So that was good. But I was struggling at the club because I just couldn't get into any kind of rhythm. I was always injured, and it was stressing me out. It was making me. I wouldn't say it was making me depressed. I didn't have clinical depression, but I certainly had to go and get counselling and get some help on the mental side of things. And it was a pretty tough period because, they'd spent a good bit of money on me and I felt I owed them, but I just couldn't keep myself fit. And I didn't feel that the physio department was doing their job, and it was just becoming increasingly difficult to get myself out on the pitch. Thankfully, in the last season, I think I ended up playing the majority of my games in that last season. Actually, I think I played 38 odd games that year. So I finished okay, scored a few goals in the league and did all right. And they did actually offer me a new contract. But by that point, I was kind of disillusioned with football and decided that I had to get out and do something different and go somewhere different.
When Peter Taylor left, when the manager departs, obviously the new manager comes in. He's going to have his own ideas about players, transfers. What goes through your mind when Neil Warnock walks in? When you've not obviously had the best of whatever, you're a luxury player for him in the last squad. What goes through your mind, honestly, when you see that Neil Warnock was obviously appointed manager of Crystal Palace? Yeah,
and I wasn't best pleased, but one thing I will say about him is he'd always been honest with me. So, calling me a luxury player, he was honest. When he came back in, he pulled me aside the first day and just said, "Listen, you helped me get into the Premier League last time. So let's get back to that." He said, "I know what you can do in the Championship. We've got a squad here that can allow you to do your thing and hopefully bring a bit of magic." Now, I look and I never probably did really bring that magic, but he certainly backed me and gave me the opportunity to play. So, again, looking back, he was honest as he could be. He gave me opportunities, and I probably didn't repay him. More because of the injuries, I was always giving it everything I had, but it was just becoming increasingly difficult to stay fit. So it definitely difficult when he first came in, but I quickly realised that all he wanted was me to work hard, try and keep myself fit and get myself in the team.
One thing about Warnock, you've got to admire his honesty with players. Even if a player is not for him, he would usually tell a player face to face for those reasons, and even give him a chance to try and rectify that by working hard or whatever the case. Do you appreciate that from a manager, and is that something you've taken on board as a coach yourself?
I didn't then, and the longer I'm away from it, the more I appreciate how honest he was. I mean, I haven't even told you this one. So when I was at Sheffield, in the first season, we played Sheffield Wednesday in the derby. Now everybody wants to play in the derby. You know, there's going to be 30,000 people there, bragging rights for the next few months. Blah blah blah. I'm driving into the game with my wife. Phone goes. It's Tony Daly. He's the fitness coach. Says the gaffer wants to see you in the office. So I put the phone down. I said to my missus, I said, I'm being dropped. She said, what do you mean you're being dropped? You're in the team yesterday. I said, yeah, but if you're going to see the gaffer on the day of the game before you get into the changing room, you're being dropped. So we'll go into the changing room, go into the gaffer's office. He says, sit down. And he said, you'll never believe this. He said, my wife had a dream last night. I'm like, yeah. He said, so I'm going to have to drop you. I'm like, what? And he said, I'm going to have to drop you. I'm playing Quinny. And that was Alan Quinn. And I'm like, I didn't understand it. Because I'd played nearly every game up to this point. I played well. I was having a good season. I've been scoring goals, assisting goals. Quinny had been in and out of the team. And I'm thinking, this is just so weird. So I didn't want to have an argument with him then. I sort of thought, I'll leave it and I'll go and see him on the Monday. You know, once everything's done, let's just get it done. So we go out, we're playing, the game's 0-0, and I'm thinking, surely he's going to put me on in a minute. Lo and behold, we go 1-0 up, Quinny scores. We win 1-0. Alan Quinn becomes the first player in history to score winners in the Sheffield derby for both sides. So he'd scored for Wednesday the year before, and then we signed him and he scored for United this year. So I couldn't even go and see Warnock on the Monday and say, like, you know, you're waffling about this. I had to just deal with it. But I look at it now and I think, how can you be that? I'd have probably lied. How can you say your wife's had a dream? It's just absolutely outrageous. But that was him. He just laid it on the table and just told me, and I had no leg to stand on. And I think of all the times that he was like that, whether it was a dream or he was just dropping me because he didn't like me or he didn't feel I was best for the team that day or whatever, he always told the truth. And he did exactly the same at Palace. He actually put me on the transfer list at the start of the last season, and he played me for the next 38 games. So he basically put me on the transfer list because he wanted to give me a kick up the arse, and it worked. So he was a great man manager, not the best tactically, but in terms of his man management, yes. And I look at it now and I think that's all I wanted in my career. I wanted somebody who was honest. Just tell me straight, what do I need to do? How do I need to get in your team? What do you want from me? And he always did. And I think that's why he's probably done what he's done in the game. You know, he always gets jobs because people probably meet him and go, look, he's a little bit madcap, a little bit crazy, but he'll go and get the job done.
Now comes quite an interesting point in your career. The move to New Zealand for the first time to play for Wellington PHEONIX. How old would you have been at this stage?
29.
29. Still quite relatively young to make what would be such an intense move, really, moving the other side of the world when you've always applied your trade in England and stuff. Let's talk about how that opportunity manifested and the decision-making process behind that move, if possible.
Okay, yeah. So coming towards the end of my time at Palace, I decided that I wasn't going to sign the deal that they'd offered me. It was a year deal. It was on decent money as well. But I just knew that I had to get away from Palace. So I had a few offers from different clubs, Leicester, Norwich, Brighton. Brighton sort of was quite appealing to me because it was home. So I was actually training there for a little while. I also went back to train with Millwall as well. And to be fair, I'd have signed for Millwall for less than anybody else. And in the end, Kenny Jackett said he wanted to sign me, then changed his mind overnight. So that didn't happen. That was a bit of a weird situation. Then, like I said, I went back to Brighton after that. I was training with Brighton. And Nick Carr at Palace had said to me, would you fancy moving out to Australia and playing in the A-League? And I said, probably too far. I'd rather go to the MLS. But I just couldn't find a way into the MLS. And he kept on to me, Nicky, and he put me onto an agent. And the agent had sorted out a deal with a club called Central Coast Mariners, which is sort of not too far from Sydney in Australia. A lovely ground with palm trees around the ground, and you can see the beach. And they rang me up and said, look, we'd like to sign you as a marquee. So in the A-League, you have 2 or 3 marquees in each team that can be paid outside of the salary cap. So it's a great deal. They'd showed me where I was potentially living on this beautiful beach, and I'd shown my missus, and we were like, right, let's go. So it was all done. I was signing this deal. I'd said goodbye to my mates at Palace. That was it. My contract had ran out. That was it. We were going. I said goodbye to my friends and family. The day I was flying out to Australia, the agent from Australia rings me up. The deal's off. I said, what do you mean the deal's off? I said, I've basically sold up all my house. I sold my house up. I'm moving out. I've said goodbye to everybody. He said, look, the deal's off. He said, I'll find out some more and I'll get back to you. So he got back to me later in the day. And little did I know, but Central Coast Mariners were part owned by Sheffield United. One of the directors at Central Coast had rang a director at Sheffield United, said, we're signing Paul Ifill. What can you tell us about him? Don't sign him. He's injury prone. He won't get through the season. He's liable to go missing, blah, 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 blah. So that was it. Deal was done. So I went back. At this point, I'm training on my own and I'm thinking, shit. And by this point, the season's nearly started in England. So the phone calls are just less and less. And I'm thinking, shit, I'm going to end up slipping out of the bloody league here. Spoke to Brighton again. Brighton agreed for me to come back down and train with them. So I'm training with Brighton. At the time, Brighton were in League One, I think. So it was a decent drop for me. But again, being close to or being home, I was willing to sign. And then I had a phone call from the Wellington PHEONIX. Looked at where it wasn't Australia, obviously. Wasn't convinced. So I said no to the deal. Back at Brighton, they were trying to offer me a deal, but the deal was like about a quarter of what I'd been on at Palace. And I'm saying to them, look, I've just played nearly 40 games in the Championship, and they just signed a guy called Liam Dickinson, and they were paying him bloody £5 a week, and yet they were offering me 2. And I remember just thinking, like, as good as Liam was, he'd never even played in the Championship at that point. And I'm thinking, I'm still a Championship player. In my mind, I'm a Championship player. I can still operate at that level, and I'm dropping down a division. I'm not getting what I'm worth. So I went back to Wellington and I just said, look, if you can change a couple of these things and get me a place to stay and blah, 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 and up my goal bonus and blah, 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 I'll come. And they did it. And I had a decision to make. So I said to my wife, I said, should we just go for a year? If I do well in the first year, I'm sure an Australian club will pick me up and we can go and see what Australia's like and blah, blah, blah. So I agreed to sign, went out. And the minute I touched down in Wellington, I went out on my own. I did a month myself before my missus. She had to pack up all the stuff and bring my daughter out and blah, blah, blah. And I rang her after a couple of days. I said, we'll never go home. She's like, what? I said, you will absolutely love this place. We will never go home. And we're still here 11 years later. My mum lives here. My sister lives here. Ellie's parents live here. Her brother lives here. So like everybody just followed us out. And there's no need to go home now.
So you just literally moved the whole Ifill family, generation on generation, to New Zealand.
Yeah.
And that is how life is now.
Yeah.
How would you sort of explain the football experience? How would you explain the level of football that you're playing at or were playing at there at the time?
Yeah. So when I got out, obviously I was 29. Like I said, just come out of the Championship, and the A-League was still pretty new, and it was probably finding its feet. And I reckon that the standard was somewhere between probably the bottom to the middle of League One. So I hit the ground running, and I was like, I'm getting so much time on the ball. Obviously, it's so much hotter out here, so you can't run around like headless chicken like you do in the Championship or League One. It's very different. So I was getting so much time and space. It was so much easier for me. So I had a really, really good season. I had a lot of fun. I played every single game, didn't get injured. It was perfect. You play Saturday to Saturday. You don't have to back up Saturday, Tuesday. And it just suited me. So I absolutely loved my time. And the good thing about it is over here, in New Zealand, you've got one professional club. So you like football, you like the Wellington PHEONIX. You don't like football, you don't care about the Wellington PHEONIX. In England, I used to get people starting on me in bars because of who I played for, You go out in Sheffield, and because you play for Sheffield United and not Sheffield Wednesday, you're a legend at one part of the bar, and you're a villain if you go to the other part of the bar. So it's just like not having any of that was so different, and it was quite refreshing. And you could just go anywhere, and people would either not bother you or they'd just stop you, and they'd be super polite, as Kiwis are, ask you a little bit about the football, and off they went. So it was completely different, but it was what I needed at that stage of my life, really.
What age did you sort of decide to take your coaching badges and start developing your whole portfolio outside of the game, as much as you're still continuing to play football?
Yeah, I was 33, and it was more forced on me because I ruptured my Achilles in a game. I knew that I'd be doing over a year of rehab, so then I started looking into my badges. Then started thinking about what I could do after football. I'd never really wanted to be a coach. It was not something that I thought I'd want to do. I thought about being an agent. I I thought I'd like to maybe potentially work in sport somewhere, but not really sure where. And I suppose the injury made me go, oh shit, I need something else. So that's when it all started. I was also approached by a friend of mine, actually, a guy called Andrew Garber, who's out here, and he worked for Fuji Xerox, and he used to pay me to go into schools and talk to the kids about my career, and at the same time he'd try and sell the school a photocopier. And I went around doing that, and it actually led me into public speaking. So I've been, over the last few years, I do a lot of public speaking. I go in to speak to football clubs, rugby clubs, about the risks there are in sport, in particular, you know, gambling and bad investments. And I've just sort of worked my way up the chain. And this year I got the opportunity to go and speak to the Crusaders. Now, like, the Crusaders are arguably the best rugby team in the world. I'm speaking to All Blacks about risk in sport. So I look back and think, sometimes you just don't know where things are going to take you. But a guy asking me to go in and help him sell photocopiers has actually led me to becoming a public speaker and speaking to arguably the best rugby players in the world about something that I never thought I'd be doing. So it's funny how, you know, the injury at the time was probably the worst period of my career, knowing that I might have to retire, but it's actually led me to some unbelievable opportunities that I probably would have never taken up if I'd have stayed fit, finished my career, say, at 35, and then gone, oh shit, now what do I do? So it was kind of a blessing in disguise, really.
We've focused a lot today on the football side of life, but we haven't really touched on, say, the gambling side of things or your life away from football. Would you say throughout your career you suffered from sometimes an addictive personality at times, and
Definitely
maybe trying to replace or get that same buzz again that you've experienced as an athlete and a professional footballer?
Definitely. And I think if you look at it, I think that's why gambling is so prevalent in professional sport. I mean, I've been watching The Last Dance, Michael Jordan's documentary, and obviously that's another level. But you look at how competitive he was with every part of his life. If he's playing golf, he has to play for money. If he's you know, he's playing in the back room with the security staff, playing shove halfpenny against the wall and stuff like that. And I, you know, again, at a much lower level in terms of ability and what I achieved, I was the same. When I played football, there's nothing I couldn't play anything unless there was something on it. So if I was playing you at a game of FIFA, I'd want to play for £20. If I was playing you at golf, and I'm all for golf, by the way, you'd beat me. It doesn't matter if you don't play, you'd beat me every single time, but I still have to play you for money. If I'm 40 years old now and I still play, and if someone wants to race me over 100 meters, I'll race them for money. That's kind of how I've always been. I've not gambled now for the last, it's just over 2 years, but I mean, for probably 20 years, I would say I was addicted to gambling. That's for sure. And I think a lot of that comes down to the addictive personality and the level of competition that I needed, I suppose, to operate at.
As well as, like you said, the addiction and the need to bet on a certain thing rather than just have that enjoyment. Do you think your upbringing in terms of being around card schools as a youngster, looking up to players who sort of live that life of going out drinking and gambling and whatever goes along with that, do you think that was a big influence on you, and that sort of?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say. Like, my granddad was a massive gambler. He had a double glazing company back in the day, was worth millions, and actually gambled it all away. That led to my father. Yeah, it led to my father never gambling. Like, he's never played cards. He's never had a bet. He doesn't bet on the Grand National. Nothing. That did nothing. So it kind of skipped a generation. But my granddad used to take me to the old Brighton Palace Pier, in the old arcades and stuff, like when I was a kid. So that's kind of where it started. I'm not going to blame him for this because I think I was always on that path. But then you go into Millwall and you have got the card schools, and because I was already interested in gambling a little bit, it was easy to join the card school. And then you're on the back of the bus and you're looking at the racing post. And I didn't like horse racing. I found it boring. But if I put a bet on it, it was exciting to me. So all of a sudden, you're in before you know you're in. And then later on in my career, I met KIETH Gillespie, who was next level of gambler, like ridiculous. He'd bet on anything, and that took my gambling to the next level too. So it's one of those things that people don't see it for what it is, and it is a disease. It's very, very, very difficult to get away from it. And I think, especially in today's climate, you're getting bombarded with adverts, you know, on the internet, social media. At one point in my career, I had gambling companies send me money online if I hadn't been on my online account for a few weeks. They just send me £500 or £1,000, and then before you know it, I was back gambling again. So even when you try to stop, they've got brilliant ways. There's super smart guys in there that can suck the gamblers back in.
What would you say, maybe not for yourself, but what would you say the biggest single amount of money you've seen a fellow professional footballer lose in one bet?
I won't say who it is, but you'd probably be able to work it out. We had a guy at Millwall who was a lot older than me when I was coming through. He played for a number of clubs, and he was next level. Like he was a sort of guy who liked so-called certainties. So he'd be willing to bet 100 grand to win 30.
Wow.
And that was a normal bet for him, you know, or 50 grand to win 10. And again, I was coming through. I was 20, 21, and seeing that, I suppose it normalised it a bit. I never got to that level. I would never spend that amount of money. But then, in saying that, I probably lost just as much money as him anyway in smaller bets, but a lot more of them. So you know, it depends on how you see things and how you do things. But certainly, I mean, in his case, he was doing it every day. Did it affect the way he played? I don't think so. Did it affect him on the pitch? No, probably not. But certainly off it, it was gambling 24/7.
We've seen the well-documented players that have come out with gambling addictions in the past, the likes of Paul Merson, Tony Adams as well, with his Sporting Chance clinic. Do you think it's a problem that is bigger and wider than the general public would know from players of a certain age group?
Definitely. You know, I got away with it most of my career, and I think the thing is, most footballers at the level that I play with or higher earn good money, and you feel like you're invincible. You feel like that money is just going to keep coming until it doesn't, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I've not put anything aside. What's next? And it's not like everybody can go into coaching. Not everybody is going to be a coach. Not everybody's going to be a pundit. Some guys who've had magnificent championship careers and not seen as big enough players to be pundits don't want to coach or can't coach, just haven't got it in them. What do? Because all of a sudden, you know, they've got the houses, they might have the cars and that, but that money doesn't last forever. So you need to find a different way or a different vocation. I think more needs to be done from the PFA side, which is obviously people are talking about that now with what's going on with Dave Kitson, and you know, I'm going off on a tangent there, but I think the PFA need to do more. You get kids coming out of school, they don't get taught anything about budgeting or anything to do about accounting with money at all, and then at 18 years old they might be earning £10,000 a week. Well, they earn that for a few years and they come out the other end and they've not saved anything, and they still don't know anything about money. So, you know, what have the PFA done in the meantime to get them ready to be financially literate when they do finish football and they've actually got to go and get another job or do something completely different, and they've just been institutionalized to turn up at training, have your kit done for you, get all your meals provided, come home, rinse and repeat every single day, play a game at the weekend. It's a pretty easy life until you're not doing it anymore, and then you've got to find a different way.
We see current affairs at the moment. A lot of stuff going on in America involving race, a lot of stuff going on worldwide. We're not so much as anything other than a football podcast involving footballers. So I think it's only fair that we talk about experiencing racism from your own point of view. Is that something that you've experienced as a player, as a professional?
Yeah, I mean, all the way through my life as a kid growing up, many different incidents. I could tell you, we could do a whole podcast on the incidents of me growing up for sure. But I mean, as a player, wasn't too bad in England. I got racially abused by a fan when we played in Adelaide when I was about 30, and that was pretty poor and pretty disappointing. It didn't really affect me much because I've dealt with it so many different times now, and it's just like, oh, you know, it's just another idiot. But I remember the guy was making monkey noises and calling me this and calling me that, and stood next to him was a little girl, and she couldn't have been older than 4 years old. And I just thought, you know, I don't know whether he was with her or not, but nobody was doing anything. I just thought to myself, what chance have we got as a society if that's okay? So this poor little 4-year-old girl is looking at that, and no one's making a stand. So she's going to grow up thinking that she can go to school, you know, at 5 and 6 and be making these same noises and saying these same things and not understanding what they mean. And I've always been one. There's been so many different times. It happens a lot on social media that people will tell people of colour how to react to racism. And I think that's, for me, I shouldn't be told how to deal with racism. That should be on me. If I decide to leave it, cool. If I decide to be angry about it, cool. If I try to tell you about it, that should be on me. And I think a lot of people need to be educated. So they say, oh, this guy should be banned from football for life. And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. But it won't happen. It never does. He'll get back in with a bloody hat on, or he'll go to an away game or whatever. What about if we can actually educate him and make him not really see the error of his ways, but see how that could affect the next generation, or it could affect, you know, his work, for instance. I mean, the guy that racially abused me might well have lost his job. Now, if he'd have known before he was going to do it, he might lose his job. He might think twice about it. It doesn't make him the fact that he's a racist change, but it might actually make him react differently. And then there's people around him that have not got to deal with it. That little girl doesn't see it. She then potentially doesn't go on to do whatever happens in her life. So there's just so many different things, and you know, the escalating position in America is just outrageous. What's been going on lately with George Floyd and the protesting, and the fact that Donald Trump is not really saying too much, and he's not articulate enough as a leader to be able to get himself out of this and actually lead a country through something like this. That's my worry. I'm not saying he's a good or bad president, but I look at the guys that came before him: Obama, Bush, Clinton. Now, I'm not going to talk about politics and say I agree with those guys or didn't agree, but they were articulate. They knew how to lead a nation. And if you look at Bush, how he led a nation through 9/11, you look at Clinton, how he dealt with all sorts of, you know, the Oklahoma City bombing. They knew what to come out and say to get a nation back together and say, right, we need to work at this together. Obama was the same. Trump is never going to do that, ever, 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 because it's all about him. He's a narcissist, and that's the biggest problem. That's my worry, and it's just escalating. And where's it going to stop? Where's it going to stop? Is somebody going to try and assassinate Trump? Is somebody trying to blow up the White House? Is he going to do something ridiculous and send the military in? I just don't see him being able to be in a position to de-escalate what's going on at the moment.
Where do you get your information from? Where do you get your news from when you're hearing or getting information about events?
Mostly Twitter these days. I think it's so instant. And again, like, you know, growing up, you're reading the paper at the weekends, maybe, if you're lucky. So you've got all last week's stuff, and oh, that's interesting. Whereas for me, I love Twitter because it's so instant. It's not always correct, but you know, you can normally fact check. There's a lot of different sites on Twitter now that, you know, tell you whether the news is actually bang on or not. You know, I think Snopes do it. There's a couple of others that do it and tell you what's right and what's wrong. And I find myself checking Donald Trump's Twitter nearly every day, and it's more just to see what he said. And I've gone to the point. I've gone beyond the point of being astonished. I mean, early days of Trump's, you know, run, and then getting in. Some of the things he's saying, you're thinking, surely he's not going to get in off the back of that. Then he gets in, and then he starts tweeting, and you're thinking, is this going to be allowed? Because I look back again, and after the stuff that he does, if Obama or Clinton or Bush did it, they'd have been out straight away. But this guy, he's a genius at what he does, because he manages to get away. He's dumbed people down that much that he can actually say whatever he wants and lie, and no one holds him accountable. It's amazing.
If you could tell someone to research any one subject at the moment or any one topic, what would that be?
Oh, blimey. I think racism from top to bottom would be a good one. And I think looking at what our ancestors had to go through and why would be an eye-opener for a lot of people. You know, I've started doing it more over the last few months just to see why certainly so many people in America are so set in their ways, I suppose. So I think if you could, again, going back to it, if you could educate people and make them realise what has gone on and what is now going on and why it's going on and why some people are so set in their ways, it might just change people's opinions a little bit. I think so much of it has become political and people just jumping on one side because they're Democrats or Republicans, so that everything that Democrats say has to be correct. Everything that Republicans have to say and believe is correct. So you just end up picking a side when you don't actually realise what's going on behind that and what people's beliefs and ideas actually are. So I think go out and think for yourself, research for yourself, whatever it is, and don't just so many people these days just jump on a bandwagon, I think, and don't really know a topic in depth. So I think before you go on social media and express any kind of opinion, go and research it. Go and find out a little bit more about it. That for me has always stood me in good stead. I think if I'm going to voice an opinion about anything, and you know, it might be the George Floyd situation, I'm going to go and research it first. Why was he arrested? Why was he treated like that? Why did nobody jump in? Well, nobody jumped in because it would have been one black guy dead turned into two black guys dead to three, you know. Research it first before I go out and speak and say, oh, this and this, and you can't do that and you can't. I don't know. I need to find that information. So go out and fact check really on anything. But that would be where I start.
One thing I would like to speak about is the imminent return of Premier League football.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of Premier League players have their opinion on it, whether it's safe to come back, whether it's not safe. Yeah. Is it the right thing to do? Is it morally right, considering the lockdown that we've had here in the UK? As an ex-professional footballer, where do you stand on it? And what is your viewpoint on football's return imminently, I think on the 17th?
Very, very difficult. For me, when you are seeing numbers like 350, 400 people dead still on a daily basis, I cannot believe it's even a conversation to be going back to play football. I can't. It's easier for me to say because I'm not in the country and we're, you know, we've already spoken. We're dealing with one active case. We're not getting cases anymore. So we are just about to start our season again. And I think we've waited it out and we're in a good spot. You know, can we wait? Potentially, we kind of have to. Why not? What's the worst that can happen? You've gone through the lockdown. You're trying to do the right things. You're definitely not there yet. But, you know, can we put the season back another couple of weeks? I think we can. And you look at Troy Deeney. He's came out and said his bit. Now he's obviously saying that people have been speaking to him. They've given him more education. He now understands the situation. And if he believes that he's safe and the club are doing the best they can do to keep him safe, then he'll play. And I think, again, it comes down to your own individual situation. And if you are worried about relatives, because that's the thing, most of the Premier League boys will be fine. They're fit lads, you know, they're going to have the best medical care. But it's the guys that are asymptomatic and don't have symptoms that pass them on to their granddad. And then granddad dies. Imagine being that guy. But you just want a game of football. You want to play football, but you can play football in a month and probably be safe. But you're going to play now, and then at the weekend you might go and see your grandparents, and one of them winds up dead because you played a game of football. How would you feel? So I think it's a little bit too soon, but I do understand it, and I understand that having the economy the way it could potentially go is going to cause a lot of deaths too. I mean, I look at the job that the politicians have to do, and it's a thankless task. You know, I just don't think you can get it right. I mean, like I said, we're pretty lucky here that we're an island nation, a long way away from everybody else. And Jacinda Ardern has done a magnificent job. But I think whoever was running the UK would have found it very difficult to find the right way through this.
Do you think there's been, and we're only speculating here, do you think there's been peer pressure on Troy Deeney to reverse his thoughts on this matter? Because he seemed quite adamant in the initial statement, because to read it, this statement was, quote, "I feel that I'm not looking after my family, then I'm not going to do it. Why am I going to put my family's life at risk to play football?" Which is an understandable concern for Troy Deeney and a lot of other players. Troy was just brave enough to go on social media and share his point of view on the subject. Do you think there's been a lot of peer pressure and a lot of people trying to convince Troy Deeney and other players that it is safe for them to return?
Yeah, I think there would be peer pressure, but I don't know. I've always liked Troy Deeney because again, he just speaks the truth. He just says exactly what is in his mind, and that's it. He doesn't really care about anybody else's feelings, and I've got a lot of time for that. And he's the captain of the club, and you kind of live and die by the sword. But I would imagine he's had some pressure from the club. Imagine he's had some pressure from maybe the PFA, whether he's crumbled to that or whether he has been told what he wanted to hear, and they've allayed his fears and said to him, look, you know, you're not going to be putting any family members in danger because of this, and this. I suppose it's difficult to speculate because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I would like to think somebody like him would be pretty strong. You know, he was great, like you said, he was great, very brave to come out and be one of the only and first people to come out and say, well, I'm not playing. That's the end of that. If my family's not safe, I'm not playing. So I think you've got to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he's now realised that his family will be safe given the rules and regulations put in place, I suppose, by the Premier League.
It's interesting as well. Obviously, Troy Deeney's captain of Watford. He clearly loves the club. He loves the badge. He loves the area. Watford, coincidentally, are sitting 17th in the Premier League. So the sceptic in me says, obviously, like, you know what I mean? We love our clubs, and the sceptic in me says, is he 100% just concerned of well-being? Is it easier for Watford to restart the season? That's the point that I'm trying to get at. I'm only again speculating.
I'm not sure. I look at it and think the problem with that, I suppose, is that Troy knows that Watford are going back with or without him. So if it is that situation and he's made a stand and then he's realised, well, it's going ahead anyway, he might be now going, well, I'm the captain. I need to do whatever it takes to keep my club in the Premier League. So I'm going back.
Yeah.
At the same time, he might be saying, yeah, being focused on that. He might be saying, well, if I'm doing this for the next 2 months, I'm not going to go and see my grandparents. I'm not going to put anybody outside of my little bubble at risk. I'm going to go into the training ground. I'm going to come home, see my wife and kids, and that's it. Rinse and repeat every day. Bang. Keep this club in the Premier League and then go again next season.
It's interesting because as much as there's going to be vulnerable people in society, I'm going to take a guess that there are going to be some footballers that are going to be more susceptible or more vulnerable to infections than other players, whether that be whatever their personal situations and stuff are. I just don't know if all this is being taken into consideration. I guess it's a case-by-case thing.
Yeah, I think that's what Troy was saying, because I think if you look at a lot of players with African backgrounds or Caribbean backgrounds, I think they're more susceptible to sickle cell trait. And so you can get infections a lot easier than you know, the general public. So I think Kante at Chelsea was one of those who was concerned about that as well and said, look, he might not be coming back. So I suppose again, it's for the Premier League and the PFA to go away and say, right, we hear you, we understand you. How can we help you? And I think again, this is when the PFA have to be absolutely on top of it. Is it safe for their players to go back and play? And we're hearing it is, but again, is this money talking, or is it that the medical professionals have actually said, yeah, we're good to go? I can't see it is. Again, I keep going back to the numbers. 350, 400 people dying a day. That does not sound safe to me.
Well, if you look at it in point of view as me and you, if we're playing a game of football, or you're playing against professional footballers, shall we say, and you're tackling one another, that's physical contact. How are then players not allowed to sit next to each other on the bench when you've got literally 22 people tackling each other on a football pitch?
Agreed. And I look at it over here, right? So we're further down the line than you guys, right? And obviously, I'm not playing professional football, but we're playing football. So for all intents and purposes, it's the same thing. It's 22 players. You're playing on a pitch. You've got referees. You've got people watching. So we played a game at the weekend. We played a friendly. During the game, I was tackled by people. During the game, a centre-back helped me up after he tackled me. So he grabbed my hand and pulled me up, and I didn't have a chance to even tell him not to. Not that I would have, but I didn't. It was just normal. We scored a goal. We celebrated in the corner. There were high fives. We finished the game. We shook hands with people. Now, All of those things are probably breaking protocol that I could probably get in trouble with. But it's human nature. But you do that on a pitch, but then, like you said, if you're supposedly sat on the bench, you're supposed to be a metre away from each other. So I don't see how it works. I don't see how it works. And so until we can do all those things, do we wait to go back to playing football? Yeah, I looked at the weekend, and I don't know if you saw the Austrian Cup final, Salzburg lifting the cup. And they've all stood there a metre apart, and the captain's at the front lifting the trophy, and they're all celebrating on their own. It's just ridiculous. No fans there, obviously. So, you know, look, we're going for a tough time all around the world. Everybody is, but I just think we've done, or most countries have done so much that why risk it when we're not quite there? I think you guys are probably 3-4 weeks away from going, right, we're ready to go. Let's crack on. And, you know, there needs to be a way to obviously kickstart the economy, yes, but it needs to be, yeah, how many deaths are worth the economy getting cranked up? I don't know. What's the number for me? There is no number. That shouldn't be the case, but that's what it looks like to me. The economy is being cranked up, and we're willing to say that 300 deaths a day is okay. That's our number at the moment.
What are your thoughts on lower tier clubs? Because you know yourself, a lot of these teams are dependent on revenue, gate revenue. They haven't got the luxury of the TV money that the Premier League clubs and even Championship clubs have got. What's the fallback system when these rich chairmen haven't got the money to supplement the gate receipts the clubs are not getting? How do these lower division clubs stay sustainable is my question. It's a real interesting.
I don't think they do. Yeah, I don't think they do, and I think we've all been caught with our pants down a little bit here. I think if you look at it, the money's always been at the top, and we've always said that it doesn't filter down. And I think when we get out of this, we need to get something in place where it does. You know, some of the transfer fees and the wages that are being paid out in the Premier League and the big leagues around the world are outrageous, look ridiculous. Could some of that be capped, and could some of that be put back into grassroots football, lower league, non-league? Will it ever happen? I'm not convinced it will. But if a pandemic of this size doesn't change how we look at football as a whole, then it's never going to change, and it will just keep going and keep going. I look at some of the wages and transfer fees now compared to when I was playing, and it's mind-boggling, absolutely ridiculous money. Yeah, I look at. You look at Bury, right? Bury have gone out of business, right? 125 years as a club. I think what they owed, I might be wrong on this, but what they owed, I think Mesut Ozil could have paid it off with 1 week's wages. Now, I'm not saying it's down to Mesut Ozil at all, but when you look at those figures, that is outrageous that we are allowing that to happen.
What do you think about that?
It's absolutely outrageous, isn't it? When you think of it like that. So, a club with that history, I don't know how we haven't got together, you know, with the PFA, with the Premier League, with whatever, and just said, right, how do we save this club? Yes, okay, there's probably many reasons why they're in the position they're in, but can we get them back on an even keel? Is there people that can go in there and give them the help that they need? And for them to go to the wall, just it shows us where football is at the moment, I think.
Before the pandemic took hold and everything sort of got brought to a halt, football was going through a mental period in terms of transfer fees. We've seen some of the biggest transfer fees ever paid, and it just seems to get rising and rising. I remember when Manchester United first signed Pogba, everyone was talking about it being an astronomical amount. Before you know it, a couple of weeks later, them fees are beaten and beaten again. Do you feel now, with the infrastructure of football and the lack of money coming in from gate receipts, the lack of sponsorship revenue and everything that goes along with that, we're going to see a sort of tailback in football transfers? For instance, like Arsenal signed a young player yesterday, I think it was George Lewis, on a free transfer. Obviously, I'm not saying he's going to slot straight into the squad by any means, but do you feel that the sort of transfers clubs will be looking at the moment, rather than laying out big outlay on players when there's just so much uncertainty regarding the game?
No, I think it's going to get worse, and I'll tell you why. So for me, if you look at the big clubs, they won't have been affected by this. So Manchester City, because of who they're owned by, won't have been affected. So Newcastle, when they get taken over, they won't have been affected. So the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So I think the gap's actually going to be bigger. And you're going to see that in the Premier League with some of the clubs that can't spend these transfer fees. The one good thing that might come out of it, the smaller Premier League clubs might have to actually go down the leagues again like we used to and start bringing the gems up and getting your Jamie Vardys and guys like that. But the bigger clubs are still going to be able to go around Europe and pick off whoever they want and pay your 100 millions and your 150s. You watch, as soon as Newcastle get taken over properly, some of the transfer fees that's going to be going on there are going to be outrageous. So it should be a really good time to reset and have a look at how football is done worldwide. But I don't see it. I think money talks as usual, and I think the big money men will find a way to keep it rolling. And that's a shame, really, because it could be reset, and we could look at how we could make football sustainable for all. But I don't see it. I don't see it too.
Now I know you're a bit of a moody Newcastle supporter. You got Millwall, Brighton, and Newcastle. So I don't know if they do a tri-scarf. We'll have to see if we.
Yeah, that's what I need.
I don't know how the Millwall feel about that. But yeah, with Newcastle's takeover and everything that. I suppose it's an exciting time for the club. And that. What are your thoughts on everything that's going on?
Yeah, obviously, again, I've tried to read up about it, and it sounds like where the money is coming from is not particularly clean. It's definitely going to be tainted. You know, you look at the regime over there and what's been going on. It's not right. But then I look at many other clubs. They're in exactly the same boat. It's just that they haven't got quite as much money as these people. So you kind of feel bad again jumping on the bandwagon. But you know, I look at Newcastle supporters over the last few years. It has been a horrific time, up and down into the Championship, out of the Championship. Mike Ashley, who is, excuse my language, but he's an arsehole. So the quicker he's out of the club, like, are the new people going to be any better? Probably not, but they've got more money and they're actually going to spend it. So for probably a lot of the fans, they're probably going, I don't care where the money comes from. I actually don't. I'm at that point where it doesn't matter. We just want to get some signings in and have a go at trying to win the Premier League again. So that's probably not the way it should be, and it's certainly not probably morally right and ethically right. But I think a lot of the Newcastle fans will just turn a blind eye and just go, let's get on with it. Let's get the signings in and see if we can have a go at winning the Premier League. And again, that goes back to what we were just talking about. There's no kind of nobody's accountable. You know, anybody can get in and buy a football club these days, and as long as they've got enough money, they can do whatever they want. And you know, I'm probably going to be supporting a club that's not ethically and morally doing the correct things, but potentially if they're up there in the Premier League and playing good football, will all be forgiven, probably.
Do you think they'll be able to sort of buy the way and buy success as quickly as Chelsea and Manchester City managed to do in the past, with the financial regularities that are now in place to kind of stop new money from taking over, in my opinion, rightly or wrongly?
I think it'll be more difficult than it was in the past. I think City managed to do it at the right time. Obviously, Chelsea, there was nothing in place. Chelsea could just go out and spend Abramovich's money left, right, and centre, and it was quite cool to watch. I think this will be more difficult, but I think they're doing it probably at the right time because, like we've already just spoken about, they might well be one of the only clubs spending that type of money. So, do they get a little bit better deals on the market? Maybe. Would you, as a, I suppose, experienced world superstar, want to go and play for Newcastle United? That's the next question. That they're not going to be in Europe next year. Are they going to be in the Champions League the year after? You know, they've got a lot of work to do. That's the bread and butter for a top player. You want to be in the Champions League every year. Can Newcastle provide that? They can't yet. Could they in 3 or 4 years potentially? So I think they'll have to start a little slower in terms of who they get. A little bit like what City did. City got guys that were very good but not superstars, and then slowly but surely started rolling. Then they obviously get Pep in, and then he gets everybody in, and now they're they're going to be in the Champions League every year from now till, whenever. And it's a bit like what Chelsea did, I think. It takes a bit of time. You can't just go, bang, a superstar, and hope it's going to work, because those guys will want to play in the Champions League.
I'm all for more clubs getting tycoon owners. I think it makes the league more exciting. You know what I mean? I really do. Like, I want to see the best players in the league, and I want to see British players developed as well and given chances. But I think with the whole Brexit thing, I'm guessing it's going to be a lot harder for players, especially from low-ranking nations who may not be in the bigger leagues, to get into the Premier League to play, or maybe into Division 2. I'm sure the Premier League won't have as much trouble, but you know what I'm trying to get.
Yeah, I think it will change things. I hope that it means that we only get the superstars in at that level, and it allows the youth and the young English player to ply their trade in the lower leagues, which is what it should be about, and the better ones will end up still going to the Premier League when the time is right. So in a funny kind of way, it might actually work itself out. I'm moaning that it won't, but if you look at it from that standpoint, could it work? If most clubs in the Premier League have got these tycoons, but you cap the amount of internationals that can come in, each club has, their quota of internationals, but you're still searching the lower leagues for your youth, for your hidden gems, and hopefully football can get back to what it was, and we've got a successful England team, because that's what it's all about. You want to see England going to the Euros and competing. You want to see England going to the World Cup and making the latter stages with players that have applied their trade all the way through.
We always see ex-pros and people that have applied their trades in different countries become sort of specialists in that field. Do you see yourself now, 20 years from now, being a specialist in New Zealand? So I'm guessing does that come under the Oceania region?
It's Oceania, yeah.
Yeah, could you be a specialist Oceania scout in 10, 15 years from now?
Potentially. I mean, I'm not going to tell you who, because I'll get him in trouble, but we had a boy called Sarpreet Singh who played for New Zealand under 20s, and he transferred to Bayern Munich. He was on the bench with Bayern Munich at the weekend.
See that?
And I've got a couple of friends, as you can imagine, who are in positions of power at certain clubs. And I messaged them on my WhatsApp group saying, look, watch the under 20 World Cup. There's a couple of kids in that group. You can get them for peanuts. And they didn't bother. And I haven't said anything up to now, but I'm thinking, like, you could have got Sarpreet Singh for, I don't know, £500,000, and it would have been an absolute bargain. And there's another couple in that squad that could go. But the thing is, the proof is always in the pudding. So now I've got a little bit more backing, because these guys have seen that I've picked one that's gone to Bayern. Not saying he was my player by any stretch, but I knew he could go on and do well. And there's another lad called Liberato Cacace, who plays for Wellington PHEONIX, plays for New Zealand. He's being talked about as the next Andy Robertson. Whether I agree with that, not too sure. But he's going to be the next one to get a move. Now, if this goes out to the right people, they might see it. But, there's players over here that are good enough to play in the top leagues, that's for sure. You've got a boy called Ryan Thomas, who came out of an academy called Olay in New Zealand. He's playing for PSV. He went to Zwolle as a kid, and then he went for €5 million to PSV. He's playing week in, week out. A Kiwi centre midfielder. So there are players good enough, and it's a bit of a hotbed, New Zealand, actually, for players, and you can get them for nothing, because they're not. A lot of them are not even contracted to professional clubs. So yes, going back to what you're asking, hopefully I can start proving that there are players capable and that I have got an eye for them, and that would be nice to be able to send players to some of my former clubs, or some of my former teammates could take them under their wing and potentially produce players that are capable of playing at the highest levels in the UK.
Football's definitely a lot to do with contacts, a lot to do with timing, a lot to do with location and proximity. So you're in a great place. You're probably one of the most knowledgeable people, I'm guessing, or one of the most experienced professionals to come into the country. So.
Yeah, I don't know about knowledgeable yet. That we'll find that out in years to come. But certainly experienced. I mean, there's not many that have played in all the leagues I've played in, for the number of clubs I've played at, the amount of games I've played. I mean, our most famous player in this country was Winton Rufer. Unbelievable player. Won the old European Cup before it was the Champions League. scored in the final. So like he's the top man over here, and he's done that. He's produced a lot of professionals in his time. He's a few years older than me, but he's the sort of go-to guy. He's looking after Liberato Cacace at the moment as well. But he's sent a lot of guys over to England and over to Germany, and he's been doing that. So really, for me, I just sort of want to follow in his footsteps and do similar. And that would be really, that would be a buzz, being able to send somebody off on a professional pathway.
You see yourself going into management? Is that something that you
eventually
undertaking in the future?
Yeah, I think that's what I've been doing over the last 5-6 years is doing my apprenticeship. I look at it, and if I started playing football at 6 or 7, at 12 I didn't know anything about football, and I think that's the same as a coach. So many coaches think they've been doing it for 5 years, they know everything, and I'm completely opposite to that. I like to know I don't know anything, and that means that I will search for more. So I go and speak to anybody I can speak to. I'd go and speak to a Sunday league coach, because if he's been coaching for 10 years, there'll be something that he can teach me. I go and watch kids' games, I go and watch men's games, I go and watch women's games. There's always something you can take if you're willing to listen and learn and delve into something. So I'm really enjoying this part of my learning, I suppose, and just knowing that you're never going to perfect the game, whether you're playing it or you're coaching it, you're never going to get it right. You're always going to make mistakes. And I think if you can take that, I suppose, mantra on, you're always going to improve. So I look at where I was at 33 compared with where I am now at 40, and I've learned so much, but there's so much more out there. So that's quite fun, I think, being on a journey like that.
When you get older and you find yourself saying sayings that maybe your dad used to say to you or your nan used to say to you, is it like that with football managers? So I'm guessing you'll be giving a speech one day and you just morph into Warnock and something will come out.
Definitely. I've done it. I've said stuff, and obviously the players that I'm speaking to would have no clue. But you finish and you go away and you think, oh my goodness, that was exactly like Mark McGee, or that's exactly what Wisey would have done in that situation, or Warnock would have said exactly that. And it's really odd. But you take the best and the worst of the people that you work with. And, there's plenty of times where I've thought to myself, I would never treat a player like that. I would never, ever treat a player like that. So that's good. That's good to know. And then you also think, cool, that worked brilliantly for me. So players that have got my mindset and my makeup, I can use that. But if they haven't got my mindset or my makeup, maybe it's a different route. So I think again, every environment you go into, if you can take a little bit away from that and use that and put that in your own little kit bag and bring it out when you need to bring it out, that's the makings of a good coach, I think.
What's been the highlight for yourself of your career? I know it's hard to condense years and time and stuff into one moment, but if you had to pick one moment to relive of your footballing career every day for the rest of your life, or just one moment to think about, like Groundhog Day, what would be your moment?
I absolutely loved the FA Cup semi-final. Loved it. And I only played 30 minutes in it.
In Sunderland?
So I think, against Sunderland. I think I'd like to go back to that. I had an unbelievable opportunity to score the goal. I hit it straight at the keeper. Timmy scores a rebound. So I'd probably tuck that in. Then I wouldn't have to run after Timmy and get injured. I could just go in the corner, have a little slide up and celebrate, and then I would have finished the game. I'd love to have finished that game. I mean, it's weird. It was like probably the best 30 minutes of my career, and then the rest of the day was shit because I got injured. So it was kind of, I think I'd like to relive that and get through that and actually play the rest of the game. That would be pretty cool.
I know it's hard to change things that have happened in the past, but have you got any regrets, any decisions you made you wish you could reverse?
Probably the biggest regret is getting to the Premier League and taking it for granted. I look back and I think if I could go back to that time, I'd have just worked harder. I'd have done more. I'd have reset my goals, and I'd have lasted longer. And I think I was too blasé about the move to Palace. I thought to myself, I'll just prove them wrong. I'll go back to Palace and I'll be back in the Premier League in no time. And then I never played in the Premier League again. So I think if I could go back to that time and just tell myself, okay, it's all going to be right, but you don't need to move clubs. You need to stick this out. You need to find a way. Go and speak to Warnock. What do you need to do to become a Premier League player, a Premier League regular? And I don't think I did that. I think I took the easy route out and went, yeah, he doesn't like me. I'm getting out. I'm going to go back down south. Probably in hindsight, that was too easy to do that. I think I should have taken the tougher road and stayed put and dug in. And that's nothing against Palace. It was just, I think it wouldn't have mattered where I'd gone at the time. But I feel like now I was kind of running away from a situation where I should have just dug in and worked harder.
You can give your younger self one piece of advice from the life and experiences you've had now as a 40-year-old adult. What would that be?
Go and seek professional mental well-being or mindset training. Really? Because I believe, and I say this to my kids now in my academy, when you're in an academy, you've all got ability. You can all play. When you're in a professional footballer club, you can all play. Like, some are a little bit better than others, but there's sort of like a catchment area where you can all do the basics, you know? You could go anywhere at any club and you could probably join in a training session and you wouldn't be out of place. If you're in the Championship, you could probably go into most Premier League clubs or League One clubs and hold your own. So what sets you apart, in my opinion, must be your level of confidence, your mindset, the way you feel on and off the pitch. So I think if you could go and find somebody who could actually help you with that, like we're always coached with what to do on the pitch, but why are we not coached to be more confident, to look after our mental well-being? I think if you could get that and get somebody helping you with that, whether it's a life coach or counselling or whatever, I personally know for myself, I would have been a way better player. Knowing what I know now, I would have been a much better player, and I would have stayed in the Premier League for a lot longer than I did.
You've played against some beasts, some absolute monsters on the pitch. Who stands out for you as the most complete player you played against?
Probably Roy Keane.
Really?
Yeah, Ronaldo, what he's gone on to do, yes, but he wasn't the Ronaldo of today then. Whereas Keane, I think at the time, Keane was playing in his 5th FA Cup final, which was ridiculous. And going into the game, everybody said he might not play because he's injured. So he played in the final injured. And he was absolutely magnificent. I don't think he broke into a run. He was jogging around the pitch. He always had time. He was directing everybody. Everybody knew their jobs, and if they didn't, he'd tell them. He was motivating. He just did everything. Like, he ran the game. He was defending in his own box. He was attacking in the other box. He was running the game. He was just the ultimate pro, and he was one of those guys you just want on your team. And I think for me, seeing him that day, I realised how far I had to go if I wanted to even get close to playing in the Premier League. That was a real eye opener.
Listen, Paul, I've really enjoyed spending some time with you. It's been a great pleasure to look back on some of your career, some of your life. It's been a great journey looking from the outside in. How much have you enjoyed being a professional footballer? That's one regret. You should never take it for granted. Getting up every day and being paid to do something you love it's a blessing. I'm not a religious person, but bloody hell, growing up as a kid, seeing the tough times that my parents had to go through just to get me a pair of football boots, with all the work they had to do, and then all of a sudden at 17 I'm being paid to train every day and have fun. I never ever should I take that for granted, and I definitely don't now. And I'm lucky to still be involved in the game at the level that I'm involved at, and that's why I still play, because there's nothing better for me in my life than playing football. It's family first, football second, but it's pretty close. And luckily my family have been there all the way through supporting me. So I'm quite fortunate that I've had a nice balance, I suppose, in my life and my career. Certainly have got a nice balance. I'm telling you, you've gone from Sheffield, where it rains every day, to New Zealand, where you've got palm trees and no rain. living every working man's dream, mate. I'm telling you.
It's been good. I've enjoyed nearly all of it, most of it. That's for sure.
Mate, I look forward to catching you up again real soon in the future. Thank you very much for football.
No problem at all.
Top man. I'll see you soon.
Easy, mate. I'll catch you again.
Top man. I'll see you in a bit.
Thanks, James. Bye-bye.